All right, good. I think it's good to start 2 minutes early because I only have 30 minutes tonight. And I'm going to start with another commercial anyway. So I'll use the 2 minutes for the commercial. Let me share my screen. So for those of you who don't recognize it, this is the Awakening Together YouTube channel. I'm on the playlists page of the YouTube channel. And what I wanted to show you, of course, if you've never been to the Awakening Together YouTube channel, there are lots of different playlists here that you might be interested to look at. And also there is the subscribe button on the side so that you can subscribe if you want to get an email when we post anything new. But what I wanted to show you was there is a new playlist called the RDA Early Teachings. This is a project that I just started this week, where when I'm walking my dog, I'm listening to teachings. I started with 2007. So I'm listening to old teachings. And when I hear something that I think, oh, that could be particularly helpful, then I come home from the walk and I record that portion of the teaching as a YouTube video. And you can tell they're, at least the first four are fairly short: 9 minutes, 43 seconds, 8 minutes, 31, 5 minutes, 26, 16 minutes, right, and 15 seconds. And in fact, you can see the titles too. The first one is called A Technique for Forgiveness. The second one is called The Tunnel of Love. That's about a vision that I had, but I think it's very helpful. It's about removing the obstacles to love's presence. The third one, How to Ask Holy Spirit or Inner Spiritual Wisdom a Question. And then the fourth one is Letting Go of the Past. So as I'm listening to these older audios and hearing things that I think are particularly helpful, I will add them to this playlist. So that's what I wanted to let you know about. Again, this playlist is called, it's RDA Early Teachings is the name of the playlist. And again, if you subscribe, any videos that Awakening Together adds, you will be alerted about through email. That's my so last week I had started answering a question and we didn't get to finish. So what I would like to do today is answer that question. It might take me 30 minutes to answer the question. I don't know. We'll see where we get with this. But let me read the question again. I also brought a cute little visual aid, which I'll teach you about in a little bit to help answer the question. But let me start by reading the question again that I had started answering last week. I have valued your teachings for many years. In Sunday's talk, you described the I am as not a being, but rather as an alive but empty container. And I explained last week that what I was saying was not a being, was the Holy Spirit. But the I am is an alive, empty container. And I just wanted to clarify that I don't see the Holy Spirit and the I am as the same thing. So I did cover that part of the question last week. I realize words are inadequate, but this is how we communicate. In the discussion about right and wrong mind, you speak of having awareness about which one you want to pay attention to. You also mentioned disregarding wrong mind, finding your way on your own path, not expecting from teachers what they cannot give you, etc. Since all that is undivided, who or what is the you that could choose or want to focus attention? And there's still more to the question, but this is as far as we got last week. This is where we left off last week. And what I had you do last week, and in fact, maybe we could just start by doing that again, was we just played a quick little game with attention. So why don't we do that again? Why don't you place attention on your armpits? Just notice your armpits for a moment. And now shift attention to your hands. Shift attention to your face. Shift attention to your seat, your butt. Place attention on your breath. And then stop. That's enough. Were you all able to do that? Yeah. So what I was getting to last week when I looked up and noticed, oh my God, we're out of time. What I was getting to last week was you are consciousness, not the person. In fact, I mentioned that the person is an effect of where consciousness places its attention. The person is not the doer. And I know you guys have heard that many, many times. The person is not the doer. So I ordered some silly putty. Kind of good that we didn't finish last week, because last week I didn't have the silly putty. I ordered some silly putty and I made this little visual aid. I'm going to put myself, I'm looking at you guys. I'm going to put myself on so I can see me for a second. So this is my visual aid. This is, I don't know if any of you guys know who that is or what that is. That's actually Jesus. It shows, if you've ever heard of a king cake, it's something that has to do with Mardi Gras, right? They make a cake called a king cake, and the person who gets the piece of cake that has Jesus in it has good luck or something. I don't really know. But I found Jesus on my walk one day not too long ago. It's a little king cake Jesus. So this is Jesus, but we're going to pretend like it's each and every one of us, right? It's just a person. This just represents a person. This represents consciousness. All right. And I'm going to call this pure consciousness. This is consciousness projected outward. And we could call that attention. That's a good word for this part of consciousness, because this part of consciousness, which sometimes people also call awareness, this part of consciousness doesn't actually move. This part of consciousness can move, attention, right? And you can be aware of your attention moving. You just were. You are aware of attention moving into the head and into the face and the armpits and whatever else I said. And so here at the end, we have this little person. So what's happening is we are mistaking ourselves for this little person, when what we really are, to some degree, is consciousness. And attention is what we project out of ourselves into the world. We could call attention like the arm, the moving arm of consciousness. All right. So when we're asking you to, for example, disregard ego and pay attention to spirit within the mind, we're not asking the person to do that. We're asking this attention, this projected part of consciousness that moves. And it's intelligent, right? It's intelligent. We're asking it to pay attention in a certain direction rather than in another direction. Now, what's interesting is the person itself, as I mentioned, is like an effect. The person itself may well manifest differently, which would be perceived possibly as behave differently based on where consciousness places its attention. And in fact, in NTI Philippians and in NTI Colossians, they each have a chapter that asks you to watch the body in order to become aware of where you are placing attention. And it's kind of interesting because if you read those chapters, they even say, don't see the body as you. So who are they talking to, right? Are those chapters talking to the person? It can't be, because it's saying, don't see the body as you. But it's saying, if you watch the body will show you where you're placing attention. So what's it talking about? It's talking about this projected part of consciousness. And so what's interesting about this projective part of consciousness, you can also kind of see on here why when we're taught to start looking for God, we're told to kind of look within. You see how it's like the link to consciousness is within. Consciousness itself is not really within. In fact, it's everywhere. But the link where we get in touch with it, we go within to find it, right? We go within and we start finding this link. We start recognizing attention. We start noticing what we can do with attention, we being consciousness. And, in the beginning, I'm going to take the person off for a moment here. In the beginning, we may be learning to place attention with certain thoughts instead of other thoughts, for example, right? But don't we eventually start learning to pay attention to attention itself? And then eventually, aren't we learning to pay attention to consciousness itself? And what ends up happening is as we pay more and more attention to consciousness itself, we reabsorb into consciousness is what we are. You see how that works? So it never is the person that's doing the work. It's always this moving part of consciousness that has somehow separated, not really separated itself. Oops, I just separated it. Which has somehow projected itself, right? I should squeeze instead of pull, projected itself out and perceives itself as this person. It's really interested in this person. It's so interested in all of the thoughts and all of the emotions and everything the person sees, right? This is just like watching a movie. The person is like a movie. And then we start learning, instead of watching the person, instead of being so interested in the person, let's become interested in attention, and let's become interested in awareness, and you can see also, you're told in the beginning, pay attention to your everyday consciousness. See, your everyday consciousness is right here at the end, but see how the everyday consciousness is the doorway to infinite consciousness, right? I mean, it's just so obvious. It's so easy. So you never were the person. In fact, if you go read, I don't remember if it's NTI 1 Peter or NTI 2 Peter, but it says in NTI, you never were the person, right? You never were the person. You always were consciousness focused on the projection of your consciousness as attention. And tasting, attention has the ability to tasting whatever you place attention on. In fact, I know when you had your attention, maybe on your armpits or your face or your seat, you were more aware of the sensations in that part of the body, right? Because attention does taste. Attention experiences, right? That's what attention does. It's the experiencing aspect of consciousness. So the answer to the question then, you also mentioned disregarding wrong mind, finding your way on your own path, not expecting from teachers what they cannot give you, etc. Since all that is undivided, who or what is the you that could choose or want to focus attention? The answer, in a way, is attention itself, right? Attention itself is really the answer in the beginning. Now you move further back. But in the beginning, it's attention itself is the answer to that question, which is just a projection of consciousness. Here, I don't need to be looking at me anymore. Let me change this back to you guys. Okay, good. So it seems that the character and the world are spontaneously appearing as one whole movement without an I or doer or owner of what appears. The spontaneously appearing part is true, but you have to understand where the spontaneously appearing comes from. The spontaneously appearing comes from where consciousness is focusing its attention. Because again, the attention is not only intelligent, the attention is divine, right? It has, you can say, creative juice in it. Attention has creative juice in it. So as we focus our attention on different stories, different thoughts, different scenarios in the world that are made out of a certain energy, like attack energy, love energy, judgment energy, fear energy, unworthiness energy, right? Those types of energies continue to manifest in some way because divinity, consciousness, is placing its attention on it. So it's absolutely true that it is spontaneously appearing, but it's spontaneously appearing because we're paying attention to it. You see? So to act as if it's just spontaneously appearing without the way the Course would call it, the Course would call the world a dream, without a dreamer is not true. There is a dreamer of the dream. Some people would call it a creator of the world, right? And that creator, that dreamer is this piece right here, the projected consciousness, which comes out through each and every one of us as our attention. So it is spontaneously appearing, but it is an effect, right? It's an effect. It's not just coming out of complete nowhere. Even the thoughts that come into your mind are manifestations that are coming into your mind because of where consciousness, which of course includes each and every one of us, has placed our attention. You know, if consciousness as a whole, in fact, remember Jesus said, with the faith of a mustard seed, you could move mountains, remember? If consciousness as a whole could, and this isn't going to happen right now, so we're just pretending here, but let's say consciousness as a whole decided today, none of us, because we're really all one, are ever going to pay attention to an unworthiness thought again. It's the end. It wouldn't take much time at all before unworthiness fell away from our world. It wouldn't show up as a thought. It wouldn't show up as a perception. It wouldn't show up as a feeling. The only reason it can appear to exist, the only reason it can manifest is because we do still give it attention, not because we're people, you understand, because we're consciousness. You see? Because we are consciousness. And our attention is divine and has a creative juice in it. And I put creation in quotes here because it only has the power to create things temporarily, temporary manifestations. But a temporary manifestation that's given attention is kind of like regenerated, right? So it can seem to have a lot of power in time. But the only reason it continues to appear is because we continue to give it our attention, especially our believing attention, you see. So since all that is undivided, who or what is the you that could choose or want to focus attention? It seems that the character, this is true, and the world are spontaneously appearing, this is true, as one whole movement without an I or a doer or an owner of what appears. That I'm saying is not wholly true, right? There is a dreamer of the dream. There is a consciousness paying attention to the energies within consciousness and believing them, right? Believe me, this I would dearly love to claim ownership of the choices and desires to follow the right mind. Now, this is an interesting point because this stuff is not so simple. You know, I always, when I teach it, I try to make it simple, but it isn't so simple. So listen to this sentence because this is really interesting. Believe me, this I would dearly love to claim ownership of the choices and desires to follow the right mind. One of the confusions, of course, is that we are or are not responsible for the thoughts that show up. Both statements are true. We're not responsible for the thoughts that show up, in that, you know, you can't make a thought show up in your mind. Like yesterday, we spent all day shopping for something. I'm not going to say what. I don't think my daughter will ever watch this, but it was a birthday present for her. So just out of complete caution, I'm not going to say what we were shopping for. But we spent all day yesterday shopping for something and we couldn't find it. And right at the end of the day, the idea occurred where this thing was, and it was very close to home. I was like, oh, isn't that funny that that thought didn't show up earlier? I am not responsible for the fact that that thought didn't show up earlier. There's no way in heck I could have made that thought show up before it did, right? So in that way, we are not responsible for the thoughts that show up in our minds. They just show up, okay? But in a way, we are responsible for the thoughts that show up in our minds. For example, if I give attention to fear thoughts, I am going to get more fear thoughts. If I give attention to unworthiness thoughts, I'm going to get more unworthiness thoughts, etc. So it's more like you're not responsible for the specific manifestation, the specific type of thought that shows up, but you are responsible for the general energy of the types of thoughts that show up. Does that make sense? And without accepting this responsibility, you're going to stay in that same loop that you're already in. Now, at the same time, I have to say this. Within consciousness, there are different vibrational levels. People at the lower vibrational levels are not at all aware of the thoughts they're paying attention to. We often call these people asleep or ignorant or unconscious. They're not at all aware they're even paying attention, right, to these thoughts. In fact, I was that way when I started A Course in Miracles and I started reading about something. I don't remember exactly what I read, but the general idea was that there were all these thoughts going on in my mind and that I was paying attention to them and I could choose between one and choose between the other. I thought that was ridiculous. I hadn't even noticed the chatter in my mind yet, right? Some of you guys are shaking your head. You remember that too. Well, people at lower vibrations haven't even noticed the chatter they're listening to all the time. So those people do not have the responsibility to choose at that level. It's not available to them yet. That's the way I should say it. But as we rise in consciousness, we become more and more aware. And we have more and more ability to make those choices. And in fact, I would suggest that as you get at a certain height in consciousness, and don't ask me where, I could never answer the question, but as you get in a certain height in consciousness, you can't help but make right-minded choices, right? I mean, all of those abilities just shift as you rise in consciousness. So whether it is true or not true, that I is not the person, I is the projected attention, but whether that projected attention at that time can make choices about right mind or wrong mind will vary on an individual basis based on the vibrational level, right? And that's why, just like I'm not guilty for that thought about where to buy this birthday gift, not showing up hours earlier, people are not guilty for their current ability or inability to watch their mind, make right-minded choices. So in that way, everything is so connected. I think that's part of what this person is pointing out. Everything is so connected that there may be a time when you really don't have the ability yet, the awareness yet, the consciousness yet to do that work. But to say that there never is that ability or there never is that consciousness is not true either. Is this making sense? And this is why each of us, we just want to be really clear about where we're at. And we always you just want to do the best where you're at. In fact, what you always have available to you, and again, this is simplifying it, but what you always have available to you is a higher consciousness choice and a lower consciousness choice in the moment, in any moment. They're both, if you are, I need 3 fingers here, maybe I'll use this. if you are right here in consciousness, whatever level this is, there's a choice right here and there's a choice right here. You see? No matter where you are, there's a choice right here and there's a choice right here. And you can make a choice that pulls you up, or you can make a choice that pulls you down. In fact, many people that are on the spiritual path at one time or still are a part of some 12 steps program. The day they made the choice to join the 12 steps program, they were actually making the higher choice instead of the lower choice. And they know that, right? So at every level that you're at, even if you're in the gutter, there's a higher choice and there's a lower choice. And often what we do, especially when we're very low in vibration, is we make the lower choice many, 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 many times. We suffer from it over and over and over and over again before we finally get the consciousness level to make the higher choice. And what's happening is we're watching, awareness, attention is watching the suffering and learning through the suffering. You know, one of the last habits that I dropped, believe it or not, was watching what I call too much TV. And the reason I call it too much TV is because at some point, I literally became, I mean, you could feel yourself becoming the couch potato. Like I wasn't really enjoying the TV anymore. My body was even getting tired of sitting in the chair, but yet I couldn't get out of the chair and do anything else. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? That's a form of suffering. That is a form of suffering. There's no doubt that the couch potato is a form of suffering. But I watched it. I felt that suffering. I felt how uncomfortable I was over and over and over and over again before one day something in me snapped and said, I'm done with this. Right? I'm just done with this. So in that way, even making the lower choice over and over again eventually leads to the higher choice, you see? And so this is why the way the right mind would say this is everyone is in the process of awakening. That even includes where consciousness is still making lower choices, because eventually the suffering will become clear and a higher choice will be made in its stead. But consciousness is doing all of this as the appearance of people, right? But it's consciousness awakening to itself. So, believe me, this I would dearly love to claim ownership of the choices and desires to follow the right mind, etc. But do I choose, or is life simply happening automatically? You know, it's both. It's both. It's not an or. Consciousness chooses, consciousness places attention and it chooses, and then life happens automatically as an effect. Consciousness chooses and life happens automatically as an effect. Consciousness chooses and life happens automatically as an effect. The person is definitely at the effect part. Right? When that day finally came where I was not willing to sit in this chair and suffer as a couch potato anymore, that was the effect of consciousness watching that over and over and over again until it got tired of that TV show, meaning the TV show of being the couch potato, right? And all of you guys, I know, or I imagine, I guess I don't know. How am I doing? 3 minutes, oh my God. All of you guys probably have experienced this at some level where one day you noticed the person reacting suddenly differently in a particular situation than it would have before. And in that moment, no one chose for the person to be at peace instead of anger. It just happened. That's the effect of the consciousness watching that occurred before that moment, right? Where the learning happened at the level of consciousness. So the person is always at the effect. And this is why, again, if you go to NTI Philippians or NTI Colossians, it tells you, you can tell where you are placing your attention. Actually, I think it uses the word faith and desire, right? But you can tell where you are placing your attention by watching what the body does, because the body's acting it out, but it's not telling you that you're the body. You're just the attention caster. So Believe me, this I would dearly love to claim ownership of the choices and desires to follow right mind, etc. But do I choose, or is life simply happening automatically? As I mentioned, that's kind of all one thing. It's not really an or. Or are you referring to the I am of consciousness as part of the illusion and the dream of waking up? Yes. The I am of consciousness has confused itself with I am a body, I am a mind, and it is waking up to, nope, I am consciousness. So yes, there is a dreamer to the dream, right? It's the I am of consciousness that's the dreamer. Now, that's all the time I have. So that's all the further I can go with that. It's possible Liz and I will talk more about this kind of thing, though, because she has woken up to all of this. So it's possible we'll chat about this. This week, I didn't have time to take any questions because I only had half an hour. So if you have questions, write them down. Either ask them next week or email them to me, and we'll just continue. I hope that was helpful to someone. Okay. Sina, if you could talk for 2 full minutes, that'd be great. I'm just going to let go of the bathroom and stuff because, as you know, I got to be here for the next hour and a half for the satsang. Okay, thank you.